All right, so we're going to texture this dragon boat. Now what I've done is I've cut it in half again because it's easier to texture one side and then flip it over and put it together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my geometry and I'm going to put a new shader on it. So I'll right click and choose material, assign new material, and I'll choose Lambert. I'm going to name it Dragon Skin. I'm going to apply the checkerboard pattern that's built into Maya. Now, sometimes you'll get an error message on this, so I'll just right click and choose material attribute, and once again I'll go back out, select that. So I can see the texture's on there, but it's not anything near what I want. So we're going to break this down into X, Y, and Z axes, and we're going to choose the planes that fall on those surfaces and use a planar mapping to apply the checkerboard to it. So I'm going to start in the orthographic front view, and I'm going to go to 6 on the keyboard. I'll hold down the space bar. I'm going to go to Create UVs, Planar Mapping, and I'm going to go to the menu for this. All right, so I need to determine what axis I'd like to place this on. And this happens to be the Z-axis. So I'm going to choose Z, and I'm going to click on Apply. You can see now it's evenly applied on the Z-axis. But the little checkerboard squares are not perfectly square. So I'm going to go up to the upper right-hand corner, and I'll click twice to access my channels window. Now down here where it says Projection Width and Height, I want to make sure that these two numbers are the same. The number itself is insignificant as long as it's the same. So I'm just going to pick an arbitrary number of 25, and you'll see now that it's pretty square. Now before I go any further, I'm going to go up and I'm going to get my texture UV map editor, and that's that vertical checkerboard that is the same as what's on our model. So once I'm in there, I'm going to turn off the texture for a minute. And next to the little horseshoe magnet to the right, I'm going to click on the blue box to see where my geometry falls. So now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to move that outside that upper right-hand corner. This is where everything will fall once we're done so that we can export a UV map to Photoshop. But it's a good idea that each time you introduce a series of faces or UV maps, you drag them out of that corner and then they get assembled and scaled to fit in that upper right-hand corner at the end. So that done, I'm going to go back to my model. I think I'll minimize my UV texture editor, put that to the right. I'm going to right click, go back to my object mode, and now I'm going to go into my perspective view because I want to be able to kind of navigate and start to edit some of these pieces. Now I'm going to do the bottom of the boat first. So these surfaces I know are going to fall on the y-axis. Anything that's on top or bottom will be y. So I'm going to go in and select the ones I think will be best suited if I lay them out in the y-axis. So I'm going to hit 5 on the keyboard, a lot easier than being distracted by the checkerboard. I'll right click, I'll go to face, and I'm going to select all the way across here. It takes a bit of playing around, and each model is different, but these are good rules of thumb. Now I'll go over and I'll set my axes for my planar map options to Y. I'll hit apply. And again, I'm going to change both of those to 25 as well. I want to keep this proportional. So if I was to look at my UV texture editor now, we zoom in on this, you can see now that that piece will eventually be up there. Now it's red, solid red. I know that in the second step when we go in and we start to sew these together, that this has to be blue. It has to be so that seam on the bottom goes along the seam at the bottom of our side view. So I'm going to go to polygons and I'm going to choose flip. All right, now I also know it's going to have to be rotated. So I'll do that now, like so, and I'll hit Command S to save. and continue. I'm starting to put these into position where I know that they should at least be next to each other when we go into Photoshop, or if I want to go a step further and start to sew these edges between these two pieces. All right, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to work a little bit more on what I think would be a y-axis. I'll go back to my object mode. I'm going to select the top of the head. So once again, I'll right click, I'll choose face, and I'm going to shift select the pieces I feel would be best suited for the y-axis. So that's about it for the top of the head. And now once again, I'll go to my planar mapping and I'll hit apply. And one more time, I want to change my projection width and height to 25. And now if I take a look at my editor, there's that piece that will eventually be up in this area. So I'm going to place it up there and I'm going to save it. And I'm going to move down towards the back of the dragon. And once again, I'll shift select the elements I feel will be together. Now, I'm going to deal with this because what I can do now is I'll shift select the top of edge of the boat opening like so. And there's one more small polygon, we'll get that one, and that's also going to be Y. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on apply. Once again, 25 to keep it consistent in scale. I'll return to my editor, and there it is. Now I know it's eventually going to go up here. I'll leave that there for now. Hit Command S to save, and then hit continue. All right, so if I was going to do the back of the neck, I know that if I were to select those polys, that would be the x-axis. So now I'll go to X, I'll hit apply. Once again, 25 for both height and width of projection. I'll return to my texture editor. And once again, that's red. So I'm going to go to polygons, I'll flip, and I'm going to put it up in the general area, kind of like so. And I might even begin to rotate this just a bit. All right. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to make a judgment call here. And these little pointed elements on the back of the neck, they're going to be mapped in the y-axis. That's the z-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and select those and pull them out. It's going to make it easier because I want this to be against where the neck goes afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead once again into my model, and I'm going to choose face, and I'll start to select out those spikes on the back of the dragon's neck here. And I'm going to hit F to get a little closer. I want to make sure I've got all of them and not anything more. So I can see that my selected faces are brown. This is good to go. Now there's our z-axis, right, pointing away from the surface of those points. So once again, I'm going to click on Z. I'll hit apply, and I'm going to 25 again for my projection width and height. And once again, I'll return to my texture editor, and I'm going to move those up into position. Now, you'll notice too that some of these elements are kind of reddish blue. So in the context of that, you can leave that because what you're seeing is a blend of the polygon faces on the other side as well. So this isn't significant because it's not going to be text that might be flipped over by accident, so we can do one side here. So I'm going to save at this point. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to break up more of this. And then I'll return once I've got the whole thing done, and we'll talk about what I actually did, and I'll point out each of these individual UV maps.